This week's episode of the Ecommerce Alley podcast was actually a live stream interview that I did with Alysson Kuhns from PacificHound.com. And we actually did this inside the Ecommerce Alley Facebook group. So if you're listening and you're not on the Ecommerce Alley Facebook groups little members tab, then you need to go join us. Go to alleypodcast.com/group where you're going to get to experience things like this live stream where Alysson is actually going to talk about how she went from around $3,800 a month to almost $23,000 per month in sales in 90 days. She walks through some of the things that she did, and then I even give you my 3 takeaways at the end of it for you to take away. Enjoy this episode. Alysson, I'm so excited. You're always so fun to talk to.
You know, I try.
I've been looking, so...
you know, we're just chaos over here, so, you know,
yeah.
Always on the move.
Well, with twins, I can absolutely see that. Yeah. I've been looking forward to this. So we've been planning this for a while, Alysson, to kind of dive into a little bit of your story because I've known you for 7 months, maybe-ish, call around that time period. And it's been cool to see your growth in your trajectory. And so I really wanted to bring someone in to do this. And I figured no one better than Pacific Hound, Alysson Kuhns. So Alysson, thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's take me back a little bit, just to kind of set the foundation here, because we've had some great growth coming from like 3,800-ish to almost 23K in 90 days on monthly revenue run rate, and you've had a lot of growth, but you have so much history before I even met you, and we've had this journey together. Can you kind of bring me back a little bit, like what even prompted Pacific Hound to start?
Yeah, gosh, I always say that like Pacific Hound and like small business ownership for me was like the perfect accident. My whole career plan was to be a collegiate track coach. I got into sports psychology in a master's program at the University of Kansas and had this grand plan to just build my mental skills and become a track and field coach because mental skills were the thing I struggled with as an athlete. And so I had this plan and I was just so bored. I was used to being an athlete and having a million things on my plate. And when I didn't have that, I was like, what do people do? And so I was really bored. And I started kind of making things or trying to make things. And other people were seeing that and were like, hey, you know, can I have this or can I have that? And I'm like, oh okay, sure. And so after a while, I kind of started to figure out like what items could I make that are going to solve a problem that I already have. And my German short hair, we had adopted her about a year before, and we lived in Kansas. And if you're from the Midwest, you know how freaking cold the winters are. I'm from Michigan, and I thought that winters were cold there, but then like you come down to Kansas and then you add in the wind, and it's a game changer. And so we had tried to buy coats for Emma, and she was just not having it. The number of coats that she donated to a forest or just like wiggled out of was ridiculous. And so like, what if I just like crocheted her a scarf? And I didn't know how to crochet at the time. So that was like a journey. And so I called my mother-in-law and I'm like, hey, can you help me learn how to crochet? And she just kind of looked at me like, what in the world?
Well, that's impressive. This is what I'm going to say right here stays right here, if that's okay with everybody. So I learned how to crochet in 6th grade when my mom and all of her friends and my grandma would get together and crochet all the time. And so one time I was like, hey, I'm in 6th grade. Let's learn how to crochet. And I started to learn how to crochet like scarves and beanies. So when you say like crochet stuff for dogs, that sounds like a lot more work to me, really challenging to me.
I mean, it was not fancy. I mean, it was honestly really terrible.
We need to post some photos of that somewhere.
I have some pictures. I considered putting them in my welcome emails, and I'm like, oh God, I can't even bring myself to do this because it's so embarrassing. But it was horrible. But people like started seeing them and were like, oh my gosh, like I want one of those. I'm like, oh my, really? Are you sure? So anyways, I started
Real
making these
confidence.
scarves. Um, yeah, I'm like, it's not great, but okay. So anyways, I started making these scarves and I was selling them faster than I could make them. You know, you can only make so many things so fast crocheting. And anyways, eventually got to the point where like I couldn't keep up with that. And so I was like, okay, well, if I want to keep doing this, you know, what has to change in order to keep going? And so that's when our like flagship product was made, and that's our bandeau scarves that are, you know, an infinity scarf for dog made out of flannel. And so they're sewn. It's just a totally different process. And that is our number one selling product now. It's crazy. So, but at the time when I started my business, it was 2015, and it was called Lots of Spots Bakery and Boutique. I specialized in everything. I specialized in colors, in dog treats, in flowers, and I mean, you name it, I probably made it. And it's probably the number one mistake I made as a business owner too, was every time somebody asked for something, I'm like, yeah, I can do that, instead of like focusing in on like one product or something that was going to, you know, solve an actual problem or bring me joy. And none of those things really did, except for the scarves. Obviously, we still have those. So, yeah. And then my wife at the time was in law school, and we had every intention of moving back to Oregon. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I'll find a job in Oregon as a track coach. Well, there's only so many colleges in Oregon, and it was just impossible to find a track and field position. And we didn't want to move around the country for my job that was not going to make very much money comparatively to hers. And so we're like, okay, this was a really bad idea. Like grad school was a terrible idea. I'm not even going to use my degree.
I don't know how you made it to grad school. I made it 9 weeks, and I'm like, yep, I'm out. And I literally dropped out 9 weeks in.
Well, I had this great plan, right? Like I had this great plan. Grad school for me was very easy, like because I just didn't have anything else on my plate.
Wow.
I was not that great of an undergrad student. I was okay, but when I got to grad school, I was like, okay, I literally was crocheting in my classes. It was horrible.
That's straight grinding there. I love that. I love hearing stories. Yeah. You know, one thing I love hearing stories of is every time I meet somebody that is their product and what they do now is usually seeded by some degree of passion or pain, and they figure out some way to get into that and make it their thing. And that's always really exciting to see. Like someone's like, oh, I started doing this, and all these people were like, hey, can I get this scarf for my dog? And then suddenly you're getting into different product lines, building product lines, and really finding your niche. I love stories like that.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that, like, you know, in grad school, I was like every other grad student, college student, I was freaking broke, right? Like living paycheck to paycheck, you know, trying to make ends meet, and really just, you know, Lots of Spots was another income stream for me. And it became something that I like actually depended upon. And when I moved back, we ended up moving back to Oregon. I went first, actually. I moved like 6 months before my wife came over, and took a couple of horrible jobs. And by summertime, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we have to figure out either A, I'm going to grow my business and I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket, or like I need to go find another job. So that fall, my wife ended up getting her first job as a lawyer down in Roseburg. And Roseburg is like a super rural area. It's a logging community.
Wow.
Pretty much the only thing there.
When I think of logging communities, I always think of the movies, because that's the only place I've ever seen them.
Yeah, no, I mean, imagine like big fields with like logs. I mean, that's what it is. we always joke that like Roseburg had it down because their log stacks were just perfect. And then anytime we see them like elsewhere, like in Salem where I live now, like, oh, Roseburg would be like so judgy of
Wow.
your log stacks.
Log snobs.
Yeah. So anyways, like we got to Roseburg and I'm like, okay, so what the heck am I going to do here? Like, I'm clearly not going to be logging. That's not going to happen. And I have a master's in sports psychology, which is completely useless down here. There's fast food joints I can work at with my master's degree.
Wow.
So, I was just like, what do I do? And so I had this epiphany, and it was right around April of 2018. And I was flying home from Michigan, and this name, Pacific Hound, came to my head. I don't know why. It's just like the weirdest thing. And I called my best friend that night, and I was like, "Hey, this name came into my head. I feel like I need to do something with it." And I was like, maybe I should start like a T-shirt business or something. And she was like, "You're such an idiot. Rebrand the company you have." And tough love for sure. And I was like, okay, that sounds feasible. I should do that. So then I pitched it to my wife that night, and she's like, "That's a terrible idea. Don't do that."
So, as all stubborn entrepreneurs do.
Yeah. I was like, well, I'm gonna do it. Yeah. And so, and she always makes this big fuss of like, "I don't know why you always ask me for my opinions. We never line up." And I was like, well, this kind, like, it's because you're wrong. And anyway, so I started like piecing together the logo and getting it all together. And we planned for a rebrand and a relaunch in 2018, so in July. And at that point, I vowed to only sell products that, one, I would use myself or on my own dogs, and that made sense for me. So, that meant no more bow ties, no more flowers, no more fabric collars, no more. It was just all things that just didn't like fulfill me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was things that I was doing because it pleased other people. And I was like, they don't bring me joy. And so, we relaunched in July with our current collars that we have now. They're a little bit different. I mean, they've been upgraded since the years, but we have our polyester webbing, and then we sublimate all of our own designs onto it. And so the whole idea is that it's adventure friendly. And so it fits in with our lifestyle of hiking and running and biking and anything outdoors. And so we launched that. It was a huge success right away. Like, people just loved it. And which was a perfect, like, told you so moment, So, things were going really well for a couple of years. Things were building really nicely. We had some really great scarf and collar launches, and everything was going well. During that time was also when like social media and I were like besties. I was posting all the time, and my following was growing, and it was the whole big picture, right? Like, I was growing when Instagram was growing.
And that was your primary source of new customer acquisition, though, right?
100%. If I didn't have Instagram, and I said that from the beginning, I said, if Instagram dies, I die. Because I didn't have anything.
Everyone write that down. If whatever dies, I die. So like, if you're just leaning into social media right now, social media is so dependent on your posting capabilities. And it also means you should diversify. So even if you went to something else, I think that's good. Awesome.
Yeah. And I knew that. I mean, I had an email list, so that helped. Excuse me. But honestly, like, any new customers that I had, I think 90% of my customers came from Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And that's insane. So so things were going good for a couple of years. In 2020, the end of 2020, I got pregnant with our twins. And I had a very, very tough pregnancy. I was pretty much just like a potato on the couch.
Mm.
Uh, if I wasn't throwing up, I was sleeping. So it was just like a really, really tough 7.5 months because I had him early, but it was hard. And my business kind of took a back seat at that point. And it was still existing, but it was like existing when I had time or when I felt good.
Mm.
Um, and so had my twins May of 2021, and that whole year after was just hard. We didn't have childcare because finding childcare for infant twins is impossible and expensive. And so I stayed home with the twins while also trying to run my business full time and take care of the house and the dogs and all, all the things. And my wife worked full time as an attorney. So she was gone, most of the day. And there's never a point where you can be like, here's the kids. I'll see you later. I need a couple hours to myself, because twins are just hard and they were so dependent upon me. In that first year that it was hard for me to ever step away. And so
Hold on one sec. Who here has kids and in their own business and feels that? Who here is like, wow, Alysson is saying exactly what I'm going through right now, or I've been through that. Man, sometimes I think those moments come up in our business where things just, no matter, your energy is so finite and it's just constantly being vied for and pulled against, and the tension is everywhere. And wow, I can like feel what that starts to be like.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think like going into motherhood, I was like, I'm going to be superwoman. I'm going to do it all. I've got this, I can run my business and be the best mom ever. And like, you can do those things, but it's like, you're just exhausted, right, by the end of the day. And, I found ways to like work with my twins' schedule, and I found ways to like incorporate them into whatever I was doing. But at the end of the day, I was just like drained. And so that was like 2021 leading into 2022. And I mean, I'm sure, as you can imagine, like my business was like not getting the attention that it needed or deserved.
So what was it like when you started to lean back into it? When you're like, okay, twins are kind of stabilizing, we get, childcare, some help with that, and to lean back in. Like, what was that? You have these big moments, and maybe some of you can resonate with this, where you have these big moments, and for many people, it was up to 2021. And then iOS 14 hits, ads get just brutally injured, and you start going down. And so what was capable in the past, but something out of your control happens, and kids step in or whatever, iOS 14, and then you have to climb back out. And so I feel like that's the trajectory that I just kind of saw. But
for sure,
knowing what did that look like as you're coming back in? Like, were you able to get traction again with everything?
Yeah, it was hard. I was doing everything that I was doing back when I was successful. So back in 2020, when I had a really great year, I was doing all of those things, or I was trying to do all of those things again. But guess what? Social media changed, and I could no longer depend upon it. So social media changed from a platform that was heavily based on photographs and supporting small businesses to a platform that was now supporting creators and video. And I was neither of those things. And so I'm no longer growing my social media platform, and I'm no longer acquiring customers that way. The occasional person, but and I have a base of 40,000 people. It's not like I have a small following, and I still couldn't reach them. And so, I'm doing all those things, and I'm just like, I'm not getting traction. I'm launching new products. I'm throwing out sales. I mean, and it's just like flatlining, right? And, I went from, the end of 2020, I was having these $25,000 months. And I was like, this is amazing. Let's get back to that. I couldn't even come close. I mean, I was averaging about $3,000 a month. And that was with like every effort that I had or could think of. And I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know what else I can do. You know, I can't, I've used all of my resources, right? And it was, gosh, beginning of September, and I'm in my kitchen, and the one thing that my wife does not like to talk about is what change in finances. They scare her. She's like, only tell me if we're in trouble. And I'm like, oh, crap. Like, I have to tell her these two things that she's not going to want to hear and have this really good conversation, right?
Wow.
And, you know, so I'm like planning this in my head, like, how am I going to approach this? How am I going to get her to like not panic, you know, on me and just like help me reason through this? And so I go in the kitchen, she's making dinner, and I'm telling her about, you know, Pacific Hound and my woes, I guess, but just like how things are just not going well, and I don't know what to do, and I'm bawling at this point, right? Like I'm just like, I'm in tears, and I'm like, I think I have to give it up. Like I don't think we can do this anymore. Like I'm not making any money. You know, if we're gonna have kids, and like we just have to. I'm just gonna have to go to do a 9 to 5. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Maybe I can like look into, I didn't even know where to start, right? I have a degree in sports psychology. And so.
And in Logging Town.
You know. And so I was just like, I don't, you know, and she looks at me and goes, what was working for you in 2020? And I was like, that's a good question. I didn't stop to think and ask myself that. And the one thing that was working for me in 2020 that made it better than any other year before was marketing. And at that time, I had hired 2 different agencies. One was a single marketer. You know, he had his own business. And then the other one was an actual agency. And I started out, I'm not sure who I started out with first. I think it was the agency. And it was just a lot more than I had bargained for. Like they were just offering help that I didn't need, essentially, you know, like creative help. And it was just like a lot of like unnecessary, like website help. It just things that I didn't need help with because I already knew how to do them. And so I ended up dropping them. And then I moved on with Zach, who ended up introducing me to NPM. But and Zach just like took my company to another level, right? But then I had to let him go because I got pregnant and I just couldn't keep up with the load that was coming in. And I didn't want to, you know, I just needed to focus on me for a little bit. And since I was the only one running my business at the time, I had to take a step back, which meant letting him go. And so, you know, to bring this back to my kitchen, Kylie goes, well, do you think that you should hire a marketing person again? And I'm like, I'll reach out to Zach and see what he thinks. And so, you know, it's like 9:00 at night, and I am like, I'm messaging Zach, and Zach, being the kind human that he is, messages me back and said, hey, you know, you should look into the NPM program, you know, do this boot camp. It was $27, I think, and do this boot camp. And
which, by the way, best $27 anyone here will ever spend on learning Facebook ads. I'll just throw it out there. I mean, we're doing it in May. Everyone pay attention to that.
It's
all right. That was a really shameless plug right there.
It was a shameless plug, but I'm going to back it because it literally changed my life. Like, it completely changed the trajectory of my business. And had I not reached out to Zach, had I not had that meltdown in the kitchen, had I not taken, you know, the plunge on a $27 course, because honestly, when I was looking at it, I'm like, who sells a course for $27 that's going to change my life? You do. You sell the course for $27 that's going to change my life. So
those are very expensive boot camps too. Dylan lives here for like 6 weeks in advance. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, you know what's funny is like I was paying, you know, that agency $3,000 a month to manage my ads with, you know, $100 in ad spend. So I don't
You
remember
needed like a
exactly.
6,000 return on ad spend to break even, I think, in that scenario.
Right. Like it was not a great financial decision, but I didn't know any better, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I hear that.
um, so $27 sounded like super appealing, but also felt like, are you sure? Like, oh, okay. But in my head, I was thinking, well, Zach helped me be super successful, and he's actually recommending somebody else, which tells me that he trusts this person, and I trust Zach. So therefore, I'm going to go down the line and trust you. And so, anyways, that night, I think it was that night. It might have been that night. I think I did. That night, I got on Botcher Bootcamp. It was like this secondhand link because the bootcamp had already happened.
Oh, you got the on-demand link. Yeah, it's definitely not as fun as the live version.
Yeah. So I think I was a couple weeks later, but I didn't know it at the time. And I sat here. I was up really late, just going through this boot camp, and I was like, "Holy crap! I didn't even know any. I had zero clue about anything that was being talked about. It was like a complete foreign language." And I went to bed that night. I was telling Kylie, and I was like, I don't know what I just watched, but I feel like it's really good. And so,
that's a good feeling.
yeah, no,
biased,
I just felt like really good about it, right? Like I felt like I'm actually going to learn something here, and I'm going to be able to do something about the situation that I'm in. So I was just feeling super cool.
And then so once I do want to throw this out there. What's interesting is, so I had no idea you had no little knowledge of Facebook and all this stuff in general, because you were so seasoned on the social media side. And usually you're on the back end, that's usually the trade-off. Like if you're super savvy and keeping up with social media, you're usually doing ads. And I remember when we met, you were just like, I can't do the social media that I was doing before. It's just so much. In the result of all of that effort, resource, and time, is just really low.
Yeah.
And I remember we met, and I tell Alysson, I'm like, well, so we have a kill cut strategy, which basically we're gonna put everything except ads and email on maintenance mode. Are you cool with that? And she's like, I'm cool with anything at this point. But you had to slice a lot. You just shifted your time, like social media, and then you moved that straight into the ads front. And I never would have known you had never used it a whole lot.
No, and you know what's funny is, and I've said this from the beginning, but having kids changes the way that you view time. And before kids, I was like, I have all the time in the world, right? Like I can do anything I want whenever I want to do it. If I want to, I don't know, post on social media at 3:00 in the afternoon, I can. Like time was not my biggest commodity. And now that I have kids, I am so stingy about how I use my time. And when Josh asked me, can you cut out social media? I was like, yes, please pick me. Like I couldn't wait to not have to post on social media. And so it was the one thing it just drained all of my energy. And I was ready for it to take a hike,
So let's walk through a little bit. What are some of the things that you did? So when you came in, you went through the boot camp, and if anyone isn't familiar, in the boot camp, we teach the ad lab method. It's this rapid experimentation methodology for testing to find what we call super ads. So you go through that. What did your kind of process look like? Because you joined the Max Profits Mentorship, you join the team, you get in, you start, you move, you already have your ad lab pretty much. Like how did you, because from 0 to 90 days, you almost set, it was like 6 point something X'd, your growth. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I went through the ad lab, and then after that I was like, okay, the next logical step feels like I should join the talk to you that I was signing up, right? I was like, just tell me the price. The answer is yes, let's go. Like, because the ad lab for me was like, it was just so eye-opening. And I was like, if this is what like the rest of the course is like, holy crap, this is so much information and it's worth every penny. And so I go through that, and then I jumped into the NPM, and there's this huge community of people that are like able and willing to help you with everything and anything. And it's a super engaged community. And I was like, this is what I need. Like, I need other business owners, because I didn't have that. Like, I didn't have a circle of like other people who were in the exact same position as me, or even a little bit ahead, right? There's plenty of people who are further ahead than I am. But I just didn't have that circle of business owners around me. And so like all of my whole family here, they're all lawyers. Like, they're completely useless when it comes to business. And so
oh, man, I hope Kyle's not listening to this.
Sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
But they all just stare at me like, I wish we could help you, but like,
yeah,
is there somebody who's like in criminal danger? Because then I can help you then. I'm like, nope, just trying to make money. So, yeah, anyway, so I joined the NPM, and the community was amazing. And then I started going into like all the modules and everything. And I was like, holy moly. So, you go through the process, and, with the end goal being to like build this super ad, right? And so I did that. I built a super ad, and it coincided really well with the season that I was in. So I joined like middle of September, and that's right around the time that I launched scarves. And so scarves for me they're a seasonal thing. So fall is when we launch them, and then through winter, January, February is kind of when things start to fizzle. And so it was just really perfect timing. And my ad it worked. It worked a little too well. And, I was bringing in customers and orders like faster than I could honestly dish them out. And eventually got to the point where my bottleneck was actually inventory. And people are like, hey, you don't have this size available. I'm like, I know. Like, and I had 2 other employees helping me. And so it just like, it exploded right in front of my face. So we went from $3,000 a month in August to, I don't even know what the next number was, like 10, and then 15, and then 20. And you're like, yeah, that went well. Okay. And so, and that super ad ran for what, 4 months?
It ran like the whole season for you.
Yeah.
Just to recap a couple things here. So Alysson is followed essentially the Max Profits mentorship path that we break down. The very first thing, and if you didn't attend, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, we did a live stream on the $0 to $1 million path and like how to get there the most efficiently. And first thing we do is we audit our time. What are we doing? And then we put things on maintenance mode by killing or cutting by 80%. Alysson did that. Alysson moved in and she did the next thing, which is where we actually need to install ads and email system. And she found her EPF, is what we call it, your evergreen product funnel, meaning the entry point for new customer acquisition that's very efficient. She found that. And when you can tie that, your offer, to a good ad, which she found in the ad lab process, against good audiences, that is just that's a happy day. And you running an ad for 4 months, most people fatigue in 2 weeks. Like, that's the common. I talk to people in my field all the time on the advertising front, and they're like, ads fatigue after like 5 days or 3 weeks. And I'm like, then I hear stories like Alysson. I'm like, oh, well, maybe the ads just suck.
Yeah. I mean, I had hundreds of comments, hundreds of shares, I don't know, thousands of likes. And
yeah,
it was a very engaged post. And I think that's, if you can get people to engage on your ads, that's when you're going to start winning.
Yeah.
And which means, I mean, you need engaging content. And, my ad wasn't really like that special, but it was a unique product. And I think, going back to 2015, Allie, when I was making scarves, like, it was a product that people wanted. And so, it solved some form of problem for people in a way that, it still continues to be successful to this day. But yeah, I mean, there was no crazy offer with it. Actually, I don't think there's any offers with that ad.
Yeah, you didn't go offer based on it, which was really impressive. So you went straight in with, this is the product. A lot of times we like to say, let's position this as an offer, like buy 2, get 1 something, or 20% off, and Alysson goes straight in with just the product, no offer, and it starts crushing. And that's a really good sign.
But I think too, ads don't work unless you have some other back end things set up with
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, for me, like, okay, I'm going to drive all these people to my website and they might purchase, but like, I need their information, right? Like, I need to be able to contact them later to let them know we have a sale going on or whatever. Otherwise, like, acquiring all these new customers or new leads or whatever, like, it doesn't do anything for you. And so I had to make sure that I had email set up as well, which I did have the base of it set up. It's not what it is now, but I had enough where I could at least like gather information and shoot people emails later on. But it's like, it's doing the groundwork. There's no point of having a super ad and trying to make all this money if you don't have the groundwork set up beforehand.
And to get them to buy again and again. Absolutely. Like, I think that's wonderful. And that's why everybody here, like, ads, email should equate usually 70 to 80% of revenue, ads and email, just because new customer acquisition. But we don't want to always have to pay for customers every time we get them. And so, Alysson, you figured this out. It's funny because like email did become a pretty big part with like your weekly email that you'd always send out, the Flash Fridays and things like that. Yeah. Like, you got that. And so, and now you're really leaning into email is what I've seen. But you went from, so just to recap some things, you went from 3,800 to, I think it was almost 23,000, 22,900, something like that. 90 days. You found your EPF. What's it been like? Now that's going through Q4 of the year. So as we're going through Q4, I would expect, right, some trajectory and increase there. That's pretty big growth though. What does it look like? Because now I would assume the first quarter, is that like the slowest part of the year for you? I feel like it would be.
Yeah, first quarter is always, like most businesses, it's always my slowest part of the year. It's usually, I mean, especially in January, like I usually use that time to like recoup myself, right? Like you just got through like the heaviest retail season and like sometimes you just need like a mental like break, right? Like you need to just shut down everything and just not, not push things. And so we took a little step back from ads at that point too. We were just kind of playing around, trying to experiment with callers and other things. And but yeah, quarter one is usually my slowest part of the year. This year, so we took a break from scarves once, like right around January, and we're like, okay, let's try and find a new EPF with dog collars. So that's my other, like, scarves and collars are like what I sell for the most part. And so I went that route, and we ended up we're averaging between January, February, and March about 15K in sales per month.
I can't wait for November.
Oh, man, I'm so
you're sitting there like January 15 to February 15, and that's the slowest. I just think, what does Q4 look like this year? Alysson had her first 100K month.
Oh, man, that would be, I keep saying it like it's going to happen, but I think, the thing that we sometimes lose track of, or, we get so fixated on is like, we constantly have to be launching new products and doing all these extra things. And I can tell you, between January and we're in the middle of April, this weekend is the first time I'm launching anything in the this entire quarter.
What was your typical cadence for launching new product?
I would say maybe like, I usually did it seasonally. So the last time I launched a product was before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So we're about 6 months.
Should have been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was Christmas collars, I think. Mm-hmm. So, it's been a minute. And so, my point with that is that I didn't have to push out new product if the product that I had was selling. And so we found a couple of prints that, designs that were like top sellers, and then we just kind of leaned into those.
Hold the phone. Really quick. That was good. You don't have to create new stuff all the time when you have other things that are selling. That's what I think Alysson said there. I think that something that I see very common is we have all these things going on. We feel burned out, and I've been there. I know what that feels like. And we have all these different things going on, and sometimes we do things just to do things. So sometimes we try to source new products just because we aren't patient enough to focus on the other stuff. Sometimes we're constantly doing product dev and trying to say, how do we release the next thing and move that because it's exciting. But a lot of times success lies in doing the boring work and doing the same stuff over and over again. So if you have things that are working, you don't have and you're running it and you feel burned out on time, you got to let some fires burn. My advice is to say, hold new product dev. Let's move into making sure that we just perfect what we have and take what's selling and let it keep selling. And then use that time for high leverage growth activities like advertising, email, marketing, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like simplifying your business. That's what I did when I transitioned from lots of spots to Pacific Hound, right? I simplified everything. I stopped selling the things that didn't make sense. And so, now that, and it's the same thing now, right? Like I actually have whittled down the number of patterns that I have. I used to not get rid of patterns. So I would just kind of like keep them in stock. And now I'm like, if they're not selling that well, we're just going to phase them out. Like we don't need them. They don't make sense. And so now it's like, I'm like super picky with, we're only going to keep this in stock if I know I can sell it. And not over the course of like 6 years, like, can I sell it quickly? Is there a demand for it?
Yeah.
And, that's where I think I've shifted my mindset is just, and so now, in seasons past, like we're launching 2 designs this weekend. In seasons past, I would have launched a dozen.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot.
No one can keep up. It's so much time. It's honestly information overload for everybody. And so just focusing on a couple of things, is really nice. And with scarves, it's a little bit different because I do bring in different patterns, but also like I sell those like hotcakes. Like I can bring in 12 patterns and know that I'm going to sell 100 of each easily. So, or, whatever number it is. But, I think it's knowing your product and just like, there is a thing with information overload, right? When there's too many options and there's just too much, people just like give up, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm like overwhelmed by the number of choices I have. I'm just going to leave. So yeah.
So you've shifted your business a lot as I'm looking from product development has been an ongoing part and improvement of that. You took a little pause to create some stability within what you already have. And now that you have this sustainability, you're now beginning to release new products because now you've created stability with your time. You're highly leveraged. You're getting return for that. And now we start stacking new products. It's amazing to see what happens in such a short time. And I know you're 6 months in, but that was the first 3 months. And your trajectory this year has got to be pretty insane. I would ask, what, if you were to give, like in this process of growth and, you hit your bottom of the barrel moment, right? Like many people here might have that moment. I have my moment. I call it the $1.06 moment. Broke as can be, tons of debt, and $1.06 in my bank accounts. You hit this, your business, you take a break to get it back up. It's not going again. And then you come to this point where something in your mind said, I'm going to get this. I'm going to make this happen. And then you made this growth, fast growth in 90 days. And your trajectory this year is crazy. Just knowing you and what you have going on, it's amazing. And if anyone here is listening to that and being like, I feel stuck or I feel like I'm in that spot, what are a few like things that you learned along the way that you could say, hey, I would impart this wisdom on you?
Yeah. I think the thing that keeps me afloat is one, I'm freaking stubborn, right? Like I do not like to give up. And for me to have that breakdown in my kitchen, that was almost like, that was me admitting defeat, right? I'm like, I just can't do anymore. But I think when things get really hard like that, when you're just at your bottom, you're at your lowest, you can't possibly do anymore, that's when the biggest victories come. And, it works the same with you, Josh. Your biggest victories came when you had $1.06 in your bank account. And, I think when our backs are against the wall, it's leaning into that. It's like, okay, this is broken. It's not working. How do I fix it? And I think so easy, we're just like, oh, it's broken. It's not going to work. I'm going to move on and go somewhere else. And it's like, no, there's a fix. You need to find it. And that just means you're going to have to dig. You're going to have to grind. And, the last 6 months with MPM was a grind. I mean, I was up all night, early in the morning. I'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning and try and work before my kids got up. And then, I'm working between naps, and I'm working at night when they go, after they go down to bed. And, when I joined MPM, I told my wife, I said, I'm spending 2 weeks locking myself in my office. The kids are on you. If you want to support me with this business, I need you to be there for the kids. Like, I need you to do this for me so that I can do this for us. And it was like the most life-changing 2 weeks of my life, right? Like, it was just me grinding and like taking the time to focus on me for once. Being a mom, we're focusing on literally everybody else but ourselves, right? All of our needs get put on the back burner. And so for those 2 weeks, they were my commitment to myself. And so, the program works. It works. If you're willing to sacrifice the time, if you're willing to just trust the process and not deviate, it's going to work. But I think so often, we either get lazy, or we think that our way is better, or so-and-so did this, therefore I should try it. And it's like, but if you just stick the course on the plan that you have in front of you, you might be surprised. And that was something that I committed to. I had all of my trust was in Josh and the team and the program, because Zach told me it worked. And I was like, okay, Zach says it works. And Zach grew my business initially. So here we go. But I think trusting the process is so huge. And that's something that my college track coach, I ran at Michigan State, and our college track coach, who, gosh, he's got a handful of Big Ten championships underneath his belt and NCAA championships. I mean, you name it, he has a long list of accolades. And the words that came out of his mouth daily were trust the process. And I mean, it's huge, right? It is so huge, but it's committing that time. It really is. You have to commit the time. If you're not willing to commit the time and you're only going to half-ass things, then you're going to get that effort, right? That's what's going to come back on you.
Something I always, and I talk about this a lot in our boot camps, like if you want to triple your sales, you have to triple either the time that you're spending on your marketing or the money that you're spending on your marketing to create that leverage. So you have to triple something. But most people can't triple their time. And so you have to triple results that you produce through high leverage things. And so I believe investing in skills and going through the process is so critical. What's interesting is like a lot of times you have to stop to do the work, and it's really hard to do the work because you want the outcome and you're just so busy in this grind mode that like I have to do order fulfillment and production and all these different things. But in order to get out of that and to create more margin and create more leverage, I need to figure out time to stop. And so you just said for 2 weeks, honey, you take care of the kids and I am grind mode. You grinded through a lot of stuff. You grew as a result of that. And the thing I wrote down that you said that I think is a big takeaway here for everybody is success lies on the other side of pain. So on the other side of that pain, when you're in those moments, that's what helps define, I believe, true leaders, true entrepreneurs, and shows the trajectory that someone might have in their business based on how they behave and what they do in those moments. And you dove right in and you made it happen. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, that phrase, I guess, has played a pretty big role in my life. I think just in, whether it's business or, even my career as a runner was very similar to that too. I walked onto my track team and I walked on Michigan State, and they told me that until I won a Big Ten championship, they weren't going to give me any money. And I was like, well, that sucks. Now I have to go win a Big Ten championship. How the heck am I going to do that? And so, you know, having those like I told you so moments is just like the best thing ever, right? Like being able to come back and tell somebody like, I freaking did it. Like you didn't think I could, but I still did it. And, you know, I don't know. Like you said, like those big moments come from like our most painful times, and or the time for somebody doubted you, right? Or didn't believe in you, or doubt is such a fuel for me, you know, like telling me I can't do something. I'm like, oh yeah, watch me. Like I'm about to go do this. Wow. So,
that's cool.
You know, the same thing applies to business ownership, right? I have no business being a business owner. Like I have a degree in sports psychology, guys. Like I have an undergrad degree in kinesiology. Like I can tell you anything you want to know about the human body, but like I couldn't tell you a single thing about how to run a Facebook ad.
Now you could. You could say something, Alysson. Now you could.
Yeah, yeah, I totally could. I mean, I can't say that I'm like expert level here, but I can navigate my way through, you know, how to set up an ad and what I'm looking for, like the metrics. You know, the acronyms when we first started, I was like, did you just speak a foreign language? I have no idea what you just said. And now it's like, I feel like they're part of my daily language and I'm having to explain it to other people when I'm talking to them. I'm like, oh, right. You don't know what CTR is. Got it.
They don't speak in acronyms like we do. That's amazing, Alysson, to see your growth. I have 3 takeaways from Alysson. These are my takeaways. You guys can take them from me. If you want my takeaways, take away my takeaways. All right, so here's what I found as I'm kind of listening here. Number 1, you became focused on high leverage activities. That's one thing that you did. You took the time of like, I'm not going to release products for 6 months, which is for all of us creators out there, it's really hard not to do something for 6 months. So you became highly focused on leveraged activities, marketing activities. You pushed through by you forcing the time, waking up at 5:30 a.m., working in between stuff. You pushed through the pain because success lied on the other side of that. And you trusted the process. You did the same things. You did the boring work over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
Those are my takeaways from you, Alysson.
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
That's good. That's good. Well, I just want to say, Alysson, thank you for being on here. We appreciate you. Obviously, we get to work with you, and it's a ton of fun. So everyone, give it up for Alysson Kuhns with Pacific Hound. We appreciate you, Alysson.
Yeah, thanks for having me.